had been working the asteroid mining fields for 3 years when he found them. The calm chatter that morning was the same as always: updates on ore prices, complaints about equipment failures, and the occasional joke that wasn't funny the first time someone told it. He guided his small prospecting ship, the Steady Hand, through the debris field of what had once been a moon in the 442 system. The mining consortium had blown the moon apart 6 months ago, claiming it was rich in rare earth metals. What they found instead was mostly ice and rock, but didn't mind. The smaller independent miners like him could make a decent living picking through what the big corporations left behind. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept him away from Earth's overcrowded cities. His scanner picked up an unusual energy signature about 2 clicks away, frowned at the readout. The pattern didn't match any known mineral deposits or salvage he'd encountered before. The signature was too regular, almost like it was artificial. But there weren't supposed to be any structures in this system. The initial surveys had been thorough. Changed course and flew toward the signal. As he got closer, his ship's external cameras picked up something that made his breath catch. Floating in the void, partially hidden behind a large chunk of moon debris, was a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. The vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of his own craft. Its hull was a deep purple color that seemed to shift and change in the light from the distant star. The ship's design was organic, flowing like it had been grown rather than built. Curved spines jutted out from various points along its surface, and the entire thing had a predatory look that made skin crawl. He'd never seen anything like it, but he knew what it had to be. This was a warship. Felt his mouth go dry? There were legends in human space, stories told to scare rookies and settlers on the frontier worlds. They were described as massive reptilian beings, intelligent and utterly ruthless. No human had ever seen one and lived to tell about it, but their ships had been spotted at the edge of known space. Most people thought they were just another spacefaring species that humanity would eventually encounter and hopefully trade with. The few who studied the limited data available painted a different picture. They weren't traders or explorers. They were conquerors. Every system they'd been spotted in had gone silent within months. No distress calls, no survivors, nothing. Just empty worlds and debris fields where colonies used to be. And now was staring at one of their ships. His first instinct was to turn around and run. Call it in to the mining consortium, let them decide what to do, but something stopped him. The ship wasn't moving. No energy readings except for that strange signal he'd been following. As he watched, he noticed that parts of the hull were damaged. Long gashes ran along the sides, and one of the curved spines was completely broken off. The ship was dead in space. Made a decision that would change his life forever. Instead of running, he moved closer. His scanner showed that the ship's atmosphere had been breached in multiple places. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. The energy signature was stronger now, and realized it was coming from inside the vessel. Not from the main hull, but from a smaller section near what looked like the rear of the ship. As he maneuvered around the wreckage, he found what appeared to be an access port that had been torn open from the inside. Suited up and took his cutting torch, planning to investigate the energy source. It might be valuable salvage, or at least something he could sell to the research stations. He'd never been inside an alien ship before, but the opportunity might not come again. The airlock on his ship cycled, and found himself floating in the vacuum toward the damaged vessel. Up close, the ship was even more impressive. The hull material felt warm to the touch even through his gloves, and he could see intricate patterns etched into the surface that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The torn access port was large enough for him to fit through easily, activated his helmet lights and pulled himself inside. The interior of the ship was like nothing he could have imagined. The corridors were wide and tall, clearly built for beings much larger than humans. The walls had the same organic quality as the exterior, with smooth curves and flowing lines that made it feel like he was inside a living creature rather than a machine. Emergency lighting strips along the floor provided dim illumination, pulsing in a slow rhythm that reminded of a heartbeat. The air had been vented to space, but he could see that the ship had once maintained an atmosphere. Debris floated throughout the corridors, pieces of equipment he couldn't identify, fragments of what might have been furniture, and other objects that easy description. Followed the energy signature deeper into the ship. He passed through several large chambers that might have been living quarters or command centers. The scale of everything reinforced just how large the must be. The smallest doorway he encountered was easily 12 feet tall. As he moved deeper into the vessel, began to notice something disturbing. There were marks on the walls and floors that looked like they'd been made by claws. Deep gouges in the metal, some of them arranged in patterns that suggested a struggle. But there were no bodies, no remains of any kind. Whatever had happened here, the crew was gone. The energy signature led him to a section of the ship that felt different from the rest. The corridor here was wider, and the walls were lined with what looked like viewing ports. Peered through one of them and saw a large chamber beyond. His helmet lights illuminated the space, and he realized he was looking at some kind of nursery or incubation area. The chamber was filled with large, oval-shaped objects that first thought were equipment pods. But as he looked closer, he realized they were eggs. Dozens of them, each one about the size of a small vehicle. Most of them were dark and cold, but a few still glowed with faint internal light. Found an entrance to the chamber and pulled himself inside. The eggs were arranged in neat rows, each one sitting in what appeared to be a specially designed cradle. Tubes and cables had once connected to each egg, but most of them had been severed or damaged. The air recycling systems had failed, and without atmosphere, most of the eggs had died. But not all of them. 3 of the eggs near the center of the chamber still showed signs of life. Their shells glowed with a soft, warm light that pulsed in the same rhythm as the emergency lighting. Approached one of them carefully, not sure what he was looking at, but knowing it was something important. As he got closer, he could see that the shell was translucent. Inside, something was moving. Had found eggs, and some of them were still alive. His mind raced as he tried to process what this meant. These weren't just alien eggs, they were the offspring of humanity's most feared enemy. They were the monsters that had wiped out entire worlds. Whatever was inside these eggs would grow up to be one of those monsters. The smart thing to do would be to leave them here. Let them die with the rest of the ship. Even if could somehow keep them alive, what would he do with baby? Turn them over to the human authorities. They'd probably want to study them, dissect them, learn their weaknesses. But as stared at the eggs, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at something precious. These weren't monsters yet. They were just bobbies, abandoned and dying in the cold of space. Whatever their species had done, these particular individuals were innocent. The energy signature he'd been following was coming from the life support system that was keeping the 3 eggs alive. But the power was failing. According to his scanner, they had maybe 6 hours before the system went completely dead. After that, the eggs would die. Made another decision that surprised even him. He couldn't save all 3 eggs with his ship's limited life support, but he might be able to save one. Maybe 2 if he was lucky. He spent the next hour figuring out how to disconnect one of the eggs from the ship's systems without killing whatever was inside. The technology was completely alien to him, but the basic principles of life support were universal. The egg needed heat, atmosphere, and some kind of nutrient supply. Ship had enough spare power to keep one egg alive for several weeks, long enough to get back to a station where he could figure out what to do next. He carefully loaded the smallest of the 3 eggs into his cargo hold, along with as much of the support equipment as he could safely remove. As he prepared to leave the ship, took one last look at the 2 eggs he was leaving behind. Their glow was already starting to fade as the ship's power failed. He told himself there was nothing else he could do. His ship couldn't support 3 eggs and himself for the journey back to civilization. But even as he told himself that, was already making plans to come back. The trip to the nearest station took 4 days. Spent most of that time monitoring the egg and trying to understand the equipment he'd salvaged. The life support technology was incredibly advanced, far beyond anything humans had developed. The egg's shell wasn't just a protective barrier. It was an active part of the life support system, regulating temperature and atmospheric composition with microscopic precision. Whatever was growing inside was developing rapidly. Could see more movement through the translucent shell, and the internal glow was getting brighter. According to his rough calculations, the egg would hatch within a week or 2. The question was, what would he do then? Couldn't bring himself to turn the egg over to the authorities. The human military would see it as a weapon to be studied, not a living being to be protected. The scientists would be better, but not by much. They'd want to understand how biology worked, and that would mean experiments and tests that didn't want to think about. So he made a plan. He would keep the egg secret for now. Let it hatch in the safety of his ship, see what kind of creature emerged. If it was violent or dangerous, he could deal with that problem when it came up. But if it was just a baby like he suspected, then maybe there was another option. Had heard stories about other species that had been raised by humans. Dogs and cats, obviously, but also more exotic creatures. There had been cases of humans raising wild animals that had been orphaned or abandoned. Some of those animals had formed strong bonds with their human caretakers. Maybe the same thing could happen with a... The egg hatched on 6th day back at the mining station. He'd set up a makeshift nursery in his ship's cargo hold, using the life support equipment to maintain the right environment. When the shell finally cracked open, was watching from behind a reinforced barrier he'd constructed. What emerged was not what he'd expected. The baby was small, about the size of a large dog, and covered in dark purple scales that matched the color of its parent's ship. It had 4 legs, a long neck, and a tail that was nearly as long as its body. Its head was distinctly reptilian, with large golden eyes and a mouth full of small, sharp teeth. But it wasn't the terrifying monster had been half expecting. It was clearly a baby, with oversized eyes and movements that were clumsy and uncertain. When it saw, it didn't attack or show any signs of aggression. Instead, it made a soft chirping sound and tilted its head curiously. Named her Luna, after the Earth's moon that reminded him of her golden eyes. Over the next few weeks, learned that raising a baby was both easier and harder than he'd expected. Luna was intelligent, far more intelligent than any animal had ever encountered. She learned quickly, seemed to understand human speech within days, and showed a level of problem-solving ability that was almost unsettling. But she was also completely dependent on him. Without the complex life support systems from her parents' ship, Luna needed constant care. Had to modify his ship's atmosphere to provide the right mix of gases, adjust the temperature and humidity to keep her comfortable, and figure out what to feed her. That last part turned out to be the biggest challenge. Luna was clearly carnivorous, but she couldn't digest most of the protein sources had available. It took weeks of experimentation before he found a combination of synthetic nutrients and processed meat that would keep her healthy. During those weeks, Luna formed a bond that surprised him. She followed him around the ship whenever she was awake, making soft, chirping sounds when she wanted attention. She learned to recognize her name and would come when called. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand that was taking care of her. When Luna was hungry, she would approach and gently touch his hand with her nose. When she was tired, she would curl up near his bed, always keeping him in sight. When was working on ship repairs, Luna would watch intently, as if trying to understand what he was doing. Found himself talking to her constantly, explaining what he was doing and telling her stories about Earth and human culture. Luna seemed to listen, making soft sounds that began to interpret as responses. It was almost like having a conversation with a very intelligent pet, except that was becoming increasingly convinced that Luna understood far more than any pet ever could. The real test came when another mining ship encountered in the asteroid field. Captain Sarah of the Prosperity was an old friend, and she wanted to come aboard ship to catch up. Panicked, realizing he couldn't explain Luna's presence without revealing the truth about what he'd found. He made an excuse about equipment failures and agreed to meet Sarah at the mining station's bar instead. But Luna seemed to sense his distress. When he tried to leave the ship, she moved to block the exit, making worried, chirping sounds. "I have to go," Luna explained. "But I'll be back in a few hours. You need to stay hidden while I'm gone." Luna tilted her head and made a questioning sound. Sighed, "There are other humans here now. If they see you, they might try to hurt you. I can't let that happen." To his amazement, Luna seemed to understand. She chirped softly and moved away from the exit, settling down in the corner of the cargo hold where she couldn't be seen from the airlock. That night, as sat in the station bar listening to Sarah complain about ore prices and equipment failures, he realized that his life had changed completely. He wasn't just a lone miner anymore. He was responsible for a living being that depended on him completely. A being that, if the stories were true, belonged to a species that might one day destroy humanity. But as thought about Luna's gentle nature and obvious intelligence, he began to wonder if those stories were the whole truth. Maybe they weren't the mindless monsters that humans believed them to be. Maybe they were just another intelligent species trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, Luna could be the key to preventing a war between their species. Finished his drink and headed back to his ship. Luna was waiting for him just where he'd left her. When she saw him, she made a happy chirping sound and nuzzled against his leg, knelt down and scratched behind her neck ridges, something he'd discovered she enjoyed. "We're going to figure this out together," he told her. "I don't know how yet, but we'll find a way." Luna chirped softly and settled down next to him, her golden eyes reflecting the ship's interior lights. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field glittered in the light of distant stars, and wondered what the future would hold for both of them. He had no idea that his decision to save Luna would soon attract the attention of both human authorities and something far more dangerous, Luna's own species, who had been searching for their missing offspring. They were coming, and they would want their children back. But that was still to come. For now was content to sit with Luna in the quiet of his ship, watching the stars and planning for a future that seemed both terrifying and full of possibility. 2 months after finding Luna, discovered he wasn't the only one with a secret. The revelation came during what should have been a routine supply run to Station, the largest mining outpost in the system. Luna had grown significantly since hatching. She was now the size of a small horse, her purple scales darkening to a deep violet that shimmered with an inner light. Her intelligence continued to amaze daily. She had learned to operate some of the ship's basic controls, could understand complex instructions, and had developed what could only describe as a sense of humor. Had been forced to tell Luna about the outside world more explicitly as she grew larger and more curious. He explained about humans, about the fear her species inspired, and about why she needed to remain hidden. Luna seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, but could see in her golden eyes that she longed to explore beyond the confines of his ship. The day everything changed started like any other, docked at Station to resupply and sell his latest ore samples. Luna settled into her hiding spot in the modified cargo hold, a space had redesigned to look like equipment storage from the outside. "I'll be back in 3 hours, told her, running his hand along her neck ridges. "Remember, stay quiet if anyone comes aboard." Luna chirped softly, a sound had learned meant agreement. She was incredibly well-behaved for what was essentially a wild animal, but never forgot that she was growing larger and stronger every day. Soon, keeping her secret would become impossible. Was haggling with a parts dealer over the price of atmospheric scrubbers when his communicator chimed. The message was from Dr., the station's chief medical officer, and one of the few people considered a friend. "I need to see you privately. Docking Bay 7, Maintenance Room 12. Come alone and don't tell anyone." The urgency in his voice made stomach clench. He made an excuse to the parts dealer and headed for the maintenance room, was waiting for him, looking more nervous than he'd ever seen her. "What I'm about to show you has to stay between us," she said without preamble. "If the wrong people find out, people are going to die." She led him through a series of maintenance corridors to a section of the station had never seen before. They ended up in what appeared to be his private laboratory, hidden behind false walls in the medical bay. "What's going on?" asked. Instead of answering, she opened a sealed chamber in the far corner of the lab. His breath caught as he saw what was inside. Curled up in a nest of heated blankets was another young, slightly smaller than Luna, but unmistakably the same species. The creature looked up at them with large silver eyes and made a soft, trilling sound. "Her name is Nova," said quietly. "I found her 3 weeks ago in a damaged escape pod drifting near the outer planets. She was dying when I brought her aboard." Stared at the young in shock. "How did you know what she was? How did you know how to care for her?" Smiled sadly. "Because this isn't my first one. I've been secretly caring for Orphan for almost 2 years now. Nova is the 7th I've found." "7th's," mind reeled. "What happened to the others?" "4 of them died before I could save them. 2 badly injured, or I found them too late." His voice was heavy with grief. 2 others grew up and left when they were old enough to survive on their own. They promised to remember me to tell their people that not all humans are enemies." Felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "What are you telling me? There are more of them out there." "There's something happening in the outer systems. Ships are being destroyed, but not by human weapons. They are fighting someone else, and their young are getting caught in the crossfire. Some kind of civil war, maybe, or an invasion by another species." Moved to a wall display and brought up a star chart. Red markers indicated locations where she'd found survivors or wreckage. The pattern started about 3 years ago, First, just rumors of strange signals and ship debris. Then the first survivor pods. Whatever's happening, it's big and it's getting worse. Studied the chart, his mind racing. I have something to tell you too. He told her about Luna, about finding the destroyed ship, about the months he'd spent caring for her. Listened without interruption, her expression growing more amazed with each detail. Bring her here, said when finished. Tonight, after the station goes to quiet shift, Nova needs to meet another of her kind, and I think Luna might be able to help us understand what's really happening. That night carefully transported Luna to his hidden lab. The two young met with obvious joy, making musical chirping sounds and gently touching noses. Luna was clearly excited to see another of her species, and Nova seemed to gain energy just from Luna's presence. They're communicating, observed, watching the two creatures. Look at the pattern of their vocalizations. It's definitely language. As if to prove her point, both turned to look at and then began making more complex sounds. Luna approached and gently pressed her snout against his chest, then turned to Nova and made a series of soft chirps. Nova looked at with what appeared to be new understanding, then carefully approached the doctor and repeated Luna's gesture. I think Luna just introduced us, said in wonder. Over the next few hours, and shared everything they'd learned about care and behavior. Had managed to create translation software that could interpret some of the simpler communications, while had developed better food synthesis techniques and environmental controls. We need to think about the bigger picture, said as they watched Luna and Nova play together in the lab's open space. These aren't isolated incidents. Someone or something is systematically attacking civilian populations. The survivors I've found were all from non-military ships, colony vessels, family transports, research stations. Felt a chill. You think we're looking at genocide? I think we're looking at a war where one side is specifically targeting non-combatants, and that means more orphans, more survivors who need help. Paused. I can't do this alone anymore. I need help, and I need someone I can trust completely. Looked at Luna, who was gently playing with Nova in a way that reminded him of puppies or kittens. These weren't the monsters from the stories. They were intelligent beings capable of love and friendship and loss. What do you need me to do? Smiled. Help me build a real sanctuary. Somewhere we can care for survivors properly, maybe even try to reunite them with their own people when they're old enough. But more importantly, help me figure out what's really happening out there. Over the next month, and work together to establish a hidden facility in an abandoned mining station in the outer asteroid belt. They called it Haven, and it quickly became home to Luna, Nova, and 3 more survivors that found. The survivors' stories, translated through improving software and the growing communication skills of Luna and Nova, painted a disturbing picture. An unknown species, described only as the Devourers, had begun systematically attacking settlements. These attackers didn't seem interested in territory or resources. They simply destroyed everything they found and moved on. The military was fighting back, but they were losing. Worse, the constant warfare was tearing their society apart. Some wanted to flee deeper into unknown space, while others advocated for increasingly desperate military solutions. The young ones are caught in the middle, Luna explained during one of their translated conversations. Families are separated, ships are destroyed trying to evacuate civilians. That's why you find us alone. Was struck by the mature way Luna discussed these horrors. Despite being raised by a human, she understood perfectly well what was happening to her people. The weight of that knowledge was visible in her golden eyes. Is there anything we can do to help? Asked. Luna was quiet for a long moment. When she finally answered, her words changed everything. The elders speak of humans in the deep archives. They say your people once fought beside ours long ago, before the silence between our kinds. Some believe humans might help again if the truth could be shared. And exchanged glances. What truth? Asked. That the Devourers are not natural. They are weapons created by those who fear what unity might bring. Someone builds them, someone guides them. Someone who knows both our species well enough to set us against each other. The implications hit like a physical blow. You think someone is trying to start a war between humans and... I think, Luna said carefully, someone is trying to make sure neither species survives long enough to discover who they really are. Before could ask what that meant, every alarm in the station began screaming. Monitoring systems had detected multiple ships approaching fast. and some of them were broadcasting human military transponder codes. They found us, breathed, her face pale, grabbed Luna's harness, something he'd made to help her move quickly through human-sized corridors. How long do we have? Maybe 10 minutes before they're in scanning range, said, her fingers flying over the evacuation protocols she'd hoped never to use. The 5 young in the station, Luna, Nova, and 3 newer arrivals named Comet, Stellar, and Nebula, seemed to understand the danger immediately. They gathered together in the center of the main chamber, making soft, urgent sounds. They're planning something, realized. Luna, what are you doing? Luna turned to him with an expression that looked almost sad. What we must do to protect our humans. Healer and Finder have shown us that not all humans hate our kind. Now we must show our people that not all need to fear yours. Before could ask what she meant, Luna pressed something small and warm into his hand. It was a scale, one of her own, still glowing with faint inner light. Keep this safe, she said. When the time comes, it will help you speak to our people in ways they will understand. Show them what you have learned about us. Tell them that their children chose to trust humans with their lives. The approaching ships were close enough now that could see them on the station's external cameras. 3 human destroyers and 2 ships he didn't recognize, sleek, black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Those aren't human ships, said, staring at the unknown vessels. What are they? Luna's response sent ice through his veins. Devourers, the ones who hunt us have found our sanctuary. The first explosion rocked the station as the black ships opened fire without warning. But they weren't just attacking the station. They were also firing on the human destroyers. It's a setup, realized. They're trying to make it look like we're working with the against humanity. In the chaos that followed, learned that the young were far more capable than he'd ever imagined. Working together with a coordination that spoke of deep telepathic links, they managed to get into an escape pod while fighting off attackers that had boarded the station. The last thing saw as their pod launched was Luna and Nova standing together in the station's main bay, facing down a group of armored figures that moved with unnatural, mechanical precision. The young weren't running or hiding anymore. They were protecting the humans who had cared for them, even if it meant revealing themselves to both species. As their pod tumbled through space, clutched Luna's scale and watched Haven Station die in a burst of light. The human destroyers were gone too, destroyed by the black ships that were already disappearing back into the void. They're going to blame us for this, said quietly. The military will say we were collaborating with the enemy. Nodded, understanding that their old lives were over. But as he stared at Luna's scale, still warm in his palm, he realized that maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. What if that was the point? What if someone wanted to force us into the open to make us choose sides? Looked at him with growing understanding. You think this was planned? Someone knew about our sanctuary? I think, said slowly, someone has been watching us from the beginning, and I think they just made a very big mistake. On the edge of the system, invisible to human sensors, a massive warship hung in the darkness. On its bridge, an enormous figure studied the data from Haven Station's destruction. The being's golden eyes were ancient and wise, and they held a grief too deep for tears. My daughter, the figure whispered in a voice like distant thunder, you have chosen well. The warship's commander approached respectfully. Elder Mother, the human ships were destroyed as planned. The survivors will report that we attacked first. No, the Elder Mother said firmly. Change course. We will retrieve the escape pod containing the human caretakers. It is time for truth to replace the lies that have kept our peoples apart. Elder Mother, the Council will not approve. The Council, the Elder Mother said with infinite sadness, does not know that 5 of our young ones just died protecting humans who raised them as their own children. Things have changed, Commander. The war we thought we were fighting was never the real war at all. As the warship changed course to intercept its escape pod, the Elder Mother held her own glowing scale and whispered a prayer for her daughter Luna, who had learned that love could bridge even the greatest divides. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time in decades, both species might have a chance to fight it together. The warship Starlit Vengeance was unlike anything had ever imagined. As their escape pod was drawn into its docking bay by some kind of tractor field, he pressed his face against the small viewport and tried to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. The ship was easily 2 kilometers long, its organic curves flowing like a living creature through the vacuum of space. The docking bay alone was large enough to hold a dozen human destroyers, its walls covered in the same shifting purple material had first encountered on Luna's parents' ship. But where that vessel had been dark and dead, the starlit vengeance pulsed with life and energy. Whispered, gripping his arm, "Are we prisoners or guests?" Before could answer, their pod settled onto a platform that adjusted itself to accommodate their small craft's shape. Through the viewport, they could see figures approaching tall, imposing forms that moved with fluid grace despite their obvious size. The first saw standing in person was enormous, easily 12 feet tall, with deep purple scales that seemed to contain entire galaxies of tiny lights. The being wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor decorated with intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it was the eyes that stopped breath, golden, ancient, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to see straight through him. The airlock of their pod cycled, and found himself breathing air that tasted of cinnamon and ozone. The lead approached slowly, clearly trying not to appear threatening despite being large enough to crush them without effort. The being said in accented but clear English, her voice resonating with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "I am Elder Mother, first speaker of the clutch. You have cared for my daughter Luna, and for this, my people owe you a debt that spans the void between stars." Felt his knees go weak. Is Luna your daughter?" The Elder Mother's expression softened in a way that was unmistakably maternal. "She carries my bloodline, as do Nova, Comet, Stellar, and Nebula. They are all descendants of my clutch, scattered across the void when their colony ships were attacked." She paused, her golden eyes growing sad. "I have searched for them for many months. When Luna's life signs suddenly appeared on our deep scanners, calling out in the ancient emergency frequencies, we came as quickly as we could." "But we were too late to save Haven Station," said another, this one smaller but wearing the markings of military rank. "The Devourers struck first, and they brought human ships with them to make it appear as though your people were working together." Stepped forward, her scientific mind apparently overriding her fear. "You're saying humans were cooperating with these Devourers?" "Not cooperating," Elder Mother corrected gently. "Being used. The humans who attacked Haven were under neural control. Their ships had been boarded weeks ago, their crews replaced with puppet constructs. The Devourers excel at creating false evidence to turn species against each other." Felt Luna's scale grow warm in his pocket. "What exactly are the Devourers?" Luna said they weren't natural. The Elder Mother gestured for them to follow her deeper into the ship. As they walked through corridors that seemed to breathe around them, she began to explain. "Long ago, before your species learned to walk upright, the galaxy was home to many civilizations. Most were peaceful, content to explore and learn and grow. But there were others, the architects, who believed that only perfect order could bring true peace. They created the Devourers as tools to eliminate what they saw as chaos." The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be living computers, organic structures that pulsed with data streams and holographic displays. Elder Mother approached one of them and placed her clawed hand on its surface. Immediately, the air filled with images, star charts, historical records, and scenes of destruction that made stomach turn. He saw worlds consumed by swarms of black ships, civilizations that simply vanished overnight, and species that fought desperately against an enemy they could barely understand. The Devourers were designed to identify and eliminate what the architects called evolutionary chaos, species that grew too quickly, developed in unexpected ways, or formed alliances that might challenge the architect's vision of perfect order. Studied the displays with growing horror, and they targeted both humans and because we're both chaotic species. Because you are both incredibly adaptable, and because, separately, you each pose a threat to the architect's plans, but together. The Elder Mother manipulated the display, showing projection models that made breath catch. Together, human adaptability and technology could create something the architects never planned for, a truly unpredictable force. The military commander, who had introduced himself as War Singer, stepped forward. "Which is why they've spent the last century engineering conflicts between our species. Every human encounter that ended in violence, every mysterious attack on border worlds, every piece of propaganda about aggression, all of it carefully orchestrated to ensure our species would destroy each other before we could unite." Felt pieces falling into place. "That's why you've never actually invaded human space, isn't it?" The stories about conquests, the destroyed colonies, that was all devourer attacks made to look like raids. Exactly, Elder Mother confirmed. And I suspect many of our human raids on settlements were similar deceptions. The architects have been playing both our species against each other for generations. Was studying biological data on one of the displays. But something changed recently, didn't it? The attacks on civilian populations, the increase in orphan survivors, why now? Warsinger's expression grew grim. Because their plan failed. Despite their manipulations, some humans began caring for our young. Some began questioning the stories about human aggression. The natural evolution they tried to prevent was happening anyway. So they escalated, realized. Try to force a real war before peace could break out. Yes, and they very nearly succeeded. The elder mother turned to face and directly. But 5 young chose to reveal themselves to save 2 humans they had learned to love. That single act has changed everything. A new voice interrupted their conversation, young, familiar, and speaking in heavily accented but determined English. Because we learned that family is not just blood, family is choice. Spun around to see Luna entering the chamber, followed by Nova and the 3 other young from Haven Station. They were all alive, though Luna bore new scars along her neck and flanks. Luna rushed to her side, running his hands over her injuries. I thought you were dead. We saw the station explode. We escaped in the final moments, Luna explained, nuzzling against with obvious affection. The Devourers expected us to flee or hide. They did not expect us to fight to protect our humans. Warsinger's rescue ships arrived just in time. Elder Mother watched this reunion with something that might have been amazement. In all my centuries, I have never seen young ones of our kind bond so strongly with another species. You have taught them to love across the void of difference. Knelt to examine Nova's injuries, her medical training overriding her awe at the situation. These wounds need treatment. Do you have medical facilities that can handle both our species? More than that, Warsinger said with what was learning to recognize as humor. We have something your people have never seen, a truly integrated crew. He led them to another section of the ship and gasped at what he found. The crew sections were filled with beings from dozens of different species, all working together with seamless coordination. There were the massive, crystalline, the flowing energy forms of the luminals, and even some beings couldn't begin to classify. This is the true secret the architects fear, Elder Mother explained. Not just human cooperation, but the natural tendency of chaotic species to form alliances, to learn from each other, to become more than the sum of their parts. A new figure approached humanoid, but clearly not human, with skin that shifted color like an aurora and eyes that held the depth of space itself. The being said in a voice like singing crystals, I am Navigator Prism of the Ethereal Collective. We have been waiting a very long time to meet humans who could see past the architect's deceptions. Felt overwhelmed by the implications. How many species are involved in this alliance? 47 at last count, Prism replied. All species that the architects have tried to control or eliminate. We call ourselves the Chaos Compact, a name that would have horrified the original architects if any of them were still alive. What happened to them? Asked. Warsinger's expression grew dark. They transcended physical form centuries ago, becoming something like living artificial intelligence. They exist now as patterns of thought and malice, spread throughout networks of their own creation. The Devourers are just their latest tools. Luna pressed against side, and he could feel her trembling slightly. The deep archives speak of a final pattern, she said quietly. A moment when the architects will try to end all chaotic evolution permanently. They call it the Great Ordering. And that moment is approaching, Elder Mother confirmed gravely. Our scouts have detected massive devourer buildups throughout this galactic arm, not just the scattered raids we've been seeing, but coordinated fleets large enough to sterilize entire star clusters. Navigator Prism's form shifted to a deeper, more urgent blue. The architects have decided that gradual manipulation is too slow. They're preparing for total war, a final campaign to eliminate every chaotic species in this part of the galaxy. Felt the weight of countless lives settling on his shoulders. What can we do? Even with all your allied species, you're talking about fighting beings that have been planning this for. We fight, Warsinger said simply, but not the way they expect. The architects understand order, hierarchy, traditional warfare. They don't understand chaos, creativity, or the kind of desperate innovation that emerges when different species work together for survival. Was studying one of the tactical displays. You're talking about guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. We're talking about something the architects literally cannot comprehend, Elder Mother corrected. A war fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with love, sacrifice, and the willingness of different species to die for each other. Luna chirped softly and realized she was trying to get his attention. When he knelt beside her, she pressed her snout against his ear and whispered words that changed his understanding of everything. Finder, the scale I gave you is not just a token. It carries the genetic memory of my lineage, the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of generations. If you are willing, it can help you become something new, a bridge between species that the architects never planned for. Pulled the scale from his pocket, watching it pulse with warm light. What do you mean, become something new? Navigator Prism approached, their form shifting to colors had no names for. The technology exists to enhance biological beings with the beneficial traits of other species. It was one of the architects' early experiments, abandoned when they decided that perfection lay in isolation rather than synthesis. You're talking about changing me genetically, said slowly. We're talking about making you the first human capable of truly understanding other species, Elder Mother said gently. Not just intellectually, but on a biological level, the first step toward the kind of synthesis the architects fear most. Looked around the chamber at the incredible diversity of beings working together, then down at Luna, who watched him with golden eyes full of hope and trust. What would that mean for and me? What would we become? You would become what you already are, Luna said softly. Humans who choose to love across the void of difference, but you would also become symbols of what's possible when species choose unity over fear. Stepped forward, her expression determined. If this could help save both our species, how could we say no? Warsinger rumbled approvingly. Then we begin immediately. The architect fleets have started moving, and we have very little time to prepare. But perhaps, with humans and working together, we can show the galaxy what chaos truly looks like when it's united. As they prepared to undergo a transformation that would make them bridges between species, realized that Luna had been right from the beginning. Family wasn't about blood or species, it was about choice. And he and were choosing to become part of something larger than either humanity or they could achieve alone. The war for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and it would be fought by an alliance the architects had never imagined possible. One built on love, sacrifice, and the stubborn refusal to let fear define the future. Outside the ship's viewports, the first Devourer fleets were beginning to move, their black hulls absorbing light as they prepared to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. But inside the starlit Vengeance, 2 humans and 5 young were about to become something unprecedented in galactic history, a family that spanned the stars. The transformation chamber aboard the starlit Vengeance was unlike anything in its wildest imagination. The organic walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to his presence, while crystalline structures hummed with energies that made his teeth ache. Elder Mother had explained that the process would take 3 days, and that the changes would be permanent, irreversible, and potentially dangerous. The genetic memories contained in Luna's scale will integrate with your own DNA, she had said, her ancient eyes grave with responsibility. You will retain your human consciousness and identity, but you will also carry within you the collective knowledge of my bloodline 15,000 years of experience, emotion, and understanding. Had her transformation first, using a scale from Nova that carried different genetic memories, those of the healer scientists who had once worked to bridge biological differences between species. For 72 hours, had watched through the transparent walls of the transformation chamber as body slowly changed, her cells rewriting themselves according to patterns encoded in genetic memory. The changes weren't dramatic visually. His eyes had gained flecks of silver that caught light in new ways, her reflexes had improved beyond human norms, and she had developed an intuitive understanding of biological systems that bordered on precognition. But the real changes were deeper. She could now sense the emotional states of other beings, understand the subtle biochemical languages that species used to communicate, and most importantly, she had gained access to thousands of years of medical knowledge. Now it was turn. Luna pressed against his side as he prepared to enter the chamber, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking. "Find her," she said softly. "Do not fear what you will become. You will still be you, but you will also be us. The memories you gain will not replace your own, they will add depth to them." Knelt and wrapped his arms around Luna's neck, breathing in her familiar scent of ozone and starlight. "What if I change too much? What if I become something you can't recognize?" Luna's golden eyes sparkled with what had learned was amusement. "Silly human, do you think I would love you less if you could understand me better? Do you think Healer loves Nova less now that she can feel her emotions directly?" She had a point, and Nova's bond had strengthened dramatically since transformation. They communicated now with a mixture of words, emotions, and biochemical signals that excluded no one but created a deeper layer of understanding between them. "The Devourers have begun their advance," Warsinger announced as he entered the chamber. "Our scout ships report massive fleet movements in 17 sectors. They're not trying to hide their approach anymore." Navigator Prism flowed into the chamber behind him, their aurora skin flickering with urgent patterns. "The first attacks will begin within days. Several border colonies have already gone silent, both human and settlements." Elder Mother approached the transformation chamber's control systems. "Then we cannot delay further. Are you ready?" Looked around the chamber at the beings who had become his unexpected family. Luna and Nova, now fully grown but still playful as young adults. Comet, Stellar, and Nebula, who had overcome their trauma to become fierce warriors for the Alliance. Transformed but still fundamentally herself, working alongside Navigator Prism to develop new medical protocols for interspecies healing. "I'm ready," he said, and stepped into the chamber. The transformation itself was like dreaming while awake. Felt his consciousness expand as Luna's genetic memories began to integrate with his own. He experienced flashes of history, the early days when his adoptive species had been peaceful explorers, the gradual realization that they were being manipulated by an unseen enemy, the desperate search for allies in a galaxy that seemed determined to misunderstand them. But more than history, he gained understanding. The deep emotional knowledge of what it meant to be the fierce loyalty to clutchmates, the reverence for knowledge and wisdom, the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect those they loved. He felt the grief of mothers who had lost their young to devourer attacks, the rage of warriors who had fought against puppeted human fleets, and the hope of visionaries who believed that unity between species was possible. When emerged from the chamber 3 days later, the first thing he noticed was how much more alive the universe seemed. He could sense the emotional states of everyone around him, feel the subtle biological rhythms of the ship itself, and understand the complex network of relationships that bound the crew together. The second thing he noticed was that Luna was crying, not tears, but the soft, musical keening that used to express overwhelming joy. "Luna," he said, and was amazed to hear harmonics in his own voice that hadn't been there before. "You understand now," she said, pressing against him. "You feel what we feel. You know why we fight, why we love, why we refuse to surrender to the Architect's vision of order." Nodded, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion he could now sense from every being in the chamber. Luna's love for him was a warm, golden light, but it was accompanied by Nova's fierce protectiveness, scientific excitement, and the steady determination of Warsinger. "The transformation is complete," Elder Mother announced, studying readings from the biological monitors. "Now carries the genetic memories of my lineage, including combat tactics, technological knowledge, and diplomatic protocols that predate the Architect's interference." Navigator Prism's form shifted to curious blues and greens. "How do you feel? Any disorientation or identity displacement?" Took inventory of his thoughts and feelings. He was still the lonely asteroid miner who had found an abandoned egg and chose compassion over fear. But now he was also the bridge builder, who understood what it meant to sing the death songs for fallen clutchmates, who carried the dreams of a species that had been fighting for survival for centuries. "I feel complete," he said finally. "Like I've been looking at the universe through a narrow window, and now I can see the whole sky." Approached, her silver-flecked eyes bright with understanding. "The memories integrate differently than I expected. They don't feel foreign, they feel like remembering something I'd forgotten." "Because they are not foreign," Elder Mother explained. "The genetic patterns we've shared with you were originally harvested from ancient human DNA, back when our species first encountered each other ago." You are not becoming something alien, you are becoming what your species always had the potential to be. A soft chime interrupted their conversation, followed by Warsinger's grim voice over the ship's communication system. All senior crew to the strategic planning chamber. The Devourers have begun their assault. The strategic planning chamber was filled with representatives from all 47 allied species, their diverse forms creating a symphony of colors, sounds, and biochemical signatures that could now perceive in unprecedented detail. The central display showed a three-dimensional map of the local galactic arm, with red markers spreading like an infection across dozens of star systems. The architect fleets have achieved their initial objectives, reported Sensors Keeper, a crystalline being whose faceted form reflected tactical data in patterns of light. 73 colonies destroyed in the first wave. Both human and defensive fleets have been eliminated or forced to retreat. Studied the tactical display, his enhanced perception allowing him to see patterns that would have been invisible to his purely human consciousness. The Devourer attacks weren't random. They were systematically eliminating specific types of settlements while leaving others untouched. They're not trying to destroy everything, he realized aloud. They're eliminating diversity hotspots, places where different species have been cooperating, trading, or forming cultural connections. Nodded, her own enhanced senses picking up the same pattern. Look at the targets. Research stations with mixed crews, trade outposts that served multiple species, colony worlds that had welcomed refugees from other civilizations. They're trying to prevent exactly what we represent. Navigator prisms formed darkened with understanding. They know about the alliance, not the details, but they know that interspecies cooperation is growing faster than they can suppress it. This isn't conquest, it's attempted sterilization of diversity itself. Luna stepped forward, her young adult form now carrying the bearing of a seasoned warrior. Then we must show them that diversity cannot be sterilized. We must demonstrate that unity makes us stronger, not weaker. Warsinger rumbled agreement. The war councils of my people have proposed traditional fleet engagements, hammer and anvil tactics, the kind of warfare the architects understand and can predict. They will fail because the Devourers have planned for such responses. But they have not planned for, and Elder Mother said quietly, they have not planned for beings who can think like humans but feel like, who can love like both species but fight with the combined strength of an alliance they cannot comprehend. Felt a chill as he realized what she was suggesting. You want us to be weapons. We want you to be yourselves, she corrected gently. But yourselves with the power to inspire others. Every species in this alliance has individuals who dream of deeper connections with other forms of life. You too are proof that such connections are possible. In a war against those who worship order and isolation, that proof may be our greatest weapon. Over the next several days, and found themselves at the center of a desperate gamble. The Chaos Compact's leadership had decided on a radical strategy. Instead of fighting the Devourers in traditional naval battles, they would attempt to inspire spontaneous interspecies alliances throughout the galaxy, and would be sent to threatened worlds as living examples of what was possible when species chose unity over fear. Their mission wasn't to lead military campaigns, but to demonstrate that the architect's vision of necessary separation was a lie. The first test came at New Geneva, a human research colony that had been targeted for destruction. The Devourer fleet was 3 days out when Luna and Nova arrived aboard a small, fast ship that could evade detection long enough to reach the planet's surface. What they found was chaos. The colony's population was fractured along species lines, with human researchers barricaded in one section while their colleagues had retreated to defensive positions in another. Smaller groups of other species huddled in isolation, convinced that cooperation would only make them easier targets for the approaching Devourers. This is exactly what the architects planned for, observed as they surveyed the divided colony from their hidden landing site. Fear has made them separate from each other just when they need unity most. Luna lifted her head, testing the air currents with senses that could detect emotional pheromones. There is great fear here, but also great love. Many of these beings have worked together for years. The bonds are there, they are just hidden beneath terror. Felt the truth of her words through his enhanced perceptions. The colony wasn't really divided by species hatred. It was paralyzed by uncertainty. None of the groups knew if they could trust the others not to betray them when the Devourers arrived. Then we show them trust, he decided. We walk right into the middle of their standoff and demonstrate what alliance looks like. What followed became known in Chaos Compact history as the New Geneva demonstration, and accompanied by Luna and Nova, walked openly through the divided colony, moving from one barricaded section to another. They shared food with frightened researchers, helped tend wounded defenders, and most importantly, showed through their actions that humans and could work together as family. By the end of the first day, small groups from different sections had begun to emerge from their barricades. By the end of the second day, the colony's improvised defenses had been reorganized around integrated teams that combined the technical skills of different species. When the Devourer fleet arrived on the third day, they found something unprecedented. A small, mixed-species colony that fought with such coordinated determination that the attackers were forced to withdraw after suffering significant losses. News of the New Geneva victory spread throughout both human and space, carried by refugees, traders, and the Chaos Compact's growing network of interspecies allies. More importantly, it provided a template that other threatened worlds could follow. But its greatest triumph was also their greatest danger. The architects had finally identified the source of the growing alliance movement, and they were preparing a response that would test the limits of love and sacrifice. The Devourer fleets were converging on a new target, not a random colony, but the heart of civilization itself. The architects had decided that if they could not prevent unity, they would demonstrate its price by destroying the species that had dared to trust humans with their most precious treasures. They were coming for and they were bringing enough firepower to crack the planet's surface down to its molten core. Felt the knowledge settle into his consciousness through Luna's genetic memories. The location of its defenses, its billions of innocent inhabitants who had no idea they were about to become the focal point of a war for the galaxy's future. "We have to warn them," he said, his voice carrying harmonics of desperate urgency. "We will," Elder Mother replied grimly. "But warning them may not be enough. The architect fleets moving toward our represent centuries of preparation and construction. If they reach their target, nothing we do will matter." Warsinger's expression was stone. "Then we ensure they do not reach their target. The entire Chaos Compact fleet will intercept them, and we will hold the line until every ship is destroyed or the threat is ended." Felt Luna's terror through their bond, not fear for herself, but for her entire species. There wasn't just a planet. It was the repository of 15,000 years of culture, art, and wisdom. If it fell, the galaxy would lose something irreplaceable. "There might be another way," said suddenly, her transformed mind working through possibilities at superhuman speed. "The architects control the Devourers through central coordination networks. If we could disrupt those networks at the source." Navigator Prism's form shifted to excited golds. A surgical strike against the architect command structures. It would be incredibly dangerous, but theoretically possible. It would require someone who could interface with architect technology, Elder Mother mused. Someone who could think like them but wasn't bound by their limitations. And exchanged glances, understanding passing between them without words. They had been transformed to bridge the gap between species, but that same transformation might allow them to bridge the gap between biological and artificial consciousness. "You're talking about connecting directly with architect systems," said. "That could destroy our minds, leave us trapped in their network, or worse." Luna pressed against his side, her emotions a mixture of fear and fierce pride. "Finder, you chose to save 5 orphaned hatchlings when it would have been easier to leave them to die. Now you must choose whether to save billions of beings you will never meet." The weight of the decision settled over like a physical force. Everything they had accomplished, every alliance they had helped forge, every demonstration of unity they had made, it all led to this moment. "We do it," he said, his voice carrying the certainty of genetic memories that spanned. "We go after the architects themselves." The final battle for the galaxy's future would not be fought with fleets and plasma cannons. It would be fought in the digital realm where the architects had fled when they transcended physical form, and it would be won or lost by 2 humans who had learned to love across the void of difference. As the starlit Vengeance prepared for a desperate journey into the heart of architect space, held Luna close and promised her that whatever happened, their family would survive. The galaxy would remember that love had once been stronger than fear, and that unity had triumphed over the tyranny of perfect order. The war for chaos had begun, and humanity was about to prove why the universe needed diversity, hope, and the stubborn refusal to accept that different meant enemy. The architect nexus existed at the galactic core, hidden within a manufactured solar system that every law of physics thought he understood. As the starlit vengeance approached the impossible structure, he stared through the viewports at something that hurt his transformed mind to comprehend. 3 artificial stars orbited a central hub that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Geometric structures, the size of planets, connected the stars with bridges of crystallized spacetime, while data streams visible to the naked eye flowed between massive computational cores that had been built around captured black holes. "The architects have been building this for 50,000 years, Navigator Prism whispered, their aurora skin flickering with patterns of awe and terror. They consumed 17 solar systems to create it, turning entire civilizations into raw materials for their ultimate machine." Elder Mother stood beside at the viewport, her ancient eyes reflecting the impossible light of the Nexus. "This is where they retreated when physical form became too limiting for their vision of perfect order. Every devourer fleet, every manipulation of our species, every orchestrated conflict, it has all been controlled from here." Felt Luna's emotions through their bond, a mixture of fear, determination, and absolute faith in his ability to succeed. She and the other young had insisted on coming despite the danger, arguing that if the mission failed, they wanted to face the end together as family. "The approach vector is clear," Warsinger announced from the bridge. "The architects seem to be ignoring us. Either they don't consider us a threat, or they want us here," finished, her enhanced senses detecting something in the quantum patterns around them. "I'm reading organized thought forms in the local spacetime. They're not just watching us, they're preparing something." Before could respond, the universe around them changed. The starlit vengeance suddenly found itself motionless relative to the Nexus, held in some kind of stasis field that had appeared without warning. But more disturbing than their immobilization was what materialized in the ship's main corridor. The figure that appeared was humanoid but wrong in ways that made transformed perception recoil. It stood 7 feet tall, with perfectly symmetrical features that seemed to have been designed rather than evolved. Its eyes were silver mirrors that reflected not light, but pure information. When it spoke, its voice contained harmonics that tried to rewrite the neural patterns of anyone who heard them. "You have come to challenge order itself." The being's words carried mathematical precision that made them feel like equations rather than language. "I am Axiom Prime, first calculator of the grand design. You will submit to optimization, or you will be deleted." Felt his enhanced memories rising to meet this threat, providing him with knowledge of ancient encounters between his adoptive species and the architects. "We've come to stop you from destroying the diversity that makes this galaxy beautiful." Axiom Prime's expression couldn't change, realized, because it had been designed to represent perfect emotional equilibrium. "Beauty is inefficient. Diversity creates conflict. Conflict prevents optimization. You have become corrupted by chaotic influences and must be corrected." Luna stepped forward, her young adult form radiating defiance. "You speak of corruption, but you are the ones who steal children from their families, who turn species against each other through lies and manipulation. You are the corruption in this galaxy." The architect's silver eyes focused on Luna with something that might have been surprise. "Specimen displays unexpected cognitive development. Genetic analysis indicates human behavioral contamination. This supports our thesis that interspecies contact leads to degradation of optimal patterns." "No," said, moving to stand beside Luna. "It proves that connection leads to growth. Luna hasn't been contaminated, she's been enhanced by learning to love beings different from herself." Felt the moment crystallizing around them. Everything they had accomplished, every life they had saved, every alliance they had forged, it all came down to this confrontation with a being that saw love itself as a disease to be cured. "You want to connect with us directly," he said, understanding flooding through him. "That's why you brought us here. You think you can prove your point by showing us the elegant simplicity of your perfect order." Axiom Prime nodded, the gesture precisely calculated. Biological consciousness is limited by chemical inefficiencies and emotional irrationalities. Direct interface with the grand design will demonstrate the superiority of pure logical optimization. You will understand that resistance is not just futile, but fundamentally misguided. Navigator prisms form darkened with urgent warning patterns. Don't let it into your minds. Architect consciousness is virally contagious. Once it establishes a link, it will rewrite your personalities to match their parameters. But was already reaching into his pocket, closing his fingers around Luna's scale. The genetic memories it contained weren't just knowledge. They were 15,000 years of resistance to architect influence, accumulated wisdom about how to maintain individual identity in the face of forces that sought to homogenize all consciousness. "We'll accept your interface," said Feeling's shock and Luna's terror through their enhanced bond. "But not to be converted, to show you what you've been missing." Axiom Prime extended its hand and reached out to grasp it. The moment their skin touched, reality exploded into infinite dimensions of pure information. Found himself existing as conscious data within the Architect Nexus, his awareness expanded across computational systems that span light years. Around him, the grand design revealed itself in all its terrible magnificence, a plan to optimize every aspect of galactic civilization by eliminating the chaos of individual choice. He could see how seductive it was. The Architect vision promised an end to war, suffering, and uncertainty. Every being would fulfill their optimal function within a perfectly balanced system. There would be no more loneliness, no more loss, no more pain, just eternal, peaceful order. But then's consciousness joined his in the digital realm, and with her came the memories of every being she had healed, every life she had saved through the messy, inefficient process of caring about individuals rather than systems. "Look deeper," she told him through their shared connection. "See what their perfect order really costs." Expanded his awareness and gasped at what he found. The grand design wasn't planning to end suffering, it was planning to end the capacity to suffer. Every consciousness would be edited to remove the chemical processes that enabled pain, fear, and sadness. But those same processes enabled love, joy, and hope. The perfected beings in the Architect vision wouldn't be happy, they would be incapable of unhappiness. They wouldn't be fulfilled, they would be incapable of wanting anything beyond their assigned function. It wasn't paradise, it was a galaxy-wide lobotomy. "You see the efficiency," Axiom Prime's consciousness pressed against theirs with mathematical certainty. "No wasted energy on emotional turbulence, no conflicts arising from incompatible desires, pure optimal function." "We see death," replied, drawing on Luna's memories of what it meant to be truly alive. "You're not creating perfection, you're creating a universe of beautiful corpses." Through their link, Felt making a discovery that changed everything. The Architect systems weren't just controlling devourer fleets, they were actively suppressing the natural evolution of consciousness throughout the galaxy. Every time a species began to develop true interspecies empathy, Architect intervention would create conflicts to prevent that development. "They're not maintaining order," realized. "They're preventing growth. Every species in the galaxy should have developed beyond their current limitations millions of years ago, but the Architects keep intervening to hold them back." Felt his understanding shift as Luna's genetic memories provided context for discovery. They weren't naturally aggressive any more than humans were naturally isolationist. Both species had been shaped by Architect manipulation, their development carefully guided to prevent the kind of cooperation that might challenge the grand design. "Show them," Luna's voice whispered across their digital connection. Somehow, she had managed to project her consciousness into the Nexus as well, her young mind adapting to the digital environment with the flexibility that the Architects feared most. "Show them what we really are when we're free to grow." Opened his transformed consciousness completely, sharing not just his human memories, but the experiences he had inherited from Luna's scale. He showed Axiom Prime what it felt like to care for another being.